The New York Rangers could not get control of their emotions last season. And don't take my word for it, because former Ranger assistant coach Michael Peca said the same thing.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1340 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Jon Chik. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Create an account, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we got a lot to do here today on Friday afternoon. It is actually just a couple of hours away now from the first round of the NHL Draft. The first round will be held a little bit later tonight, and then the second round, well, really the rest of the entire draft, will be held starting midday on Saturday. So definitely looking forward to that. Obviously, the Rangers do not have a first-round pick, but they have some important decisions to make as it pertains to the draft. And if you don't have a first-rounder, that just makes it that much more important to make the rest of your picks count, namely your second rounder. What we're actually going to do a little bit later today is take a look at a couple of different options that the Rangers would have with their second round draft pick, number 43 overall. I've got 3 players earmarked that I would like to talk about today. But for right now, like I said just a second ago, I want to go ahead and kick off this episode by talking a little bit about some interesting comments that Michael Peca made. Peca now going to be an assistant coach with the Chicago Blackhawks, but basically, he did an interview, about a half an hour interview with Johnny Lazarus on Morning Cup of Coffee. And you can see the episode for yourself if you want to hear the entire thing. It was an interesting interview, both the Ranger questions and other questions as well. So I definitely recommend going and checking that out. But we'll start with some other interesting things that are somewhat related to the Rangers, and then we'll get to kind of the meat and potatoes and what Peca said on everything that went wrong with this Ranger team last season. But he was asked about JJ Peterka, because obviously Peterka was recently traded to Utah, and just about everybody, myself included, feels that Utah, or rather that Buffalo, did not get nearly enough in exchange for JJ Peterka. They basically just got 2 players, and, there's different opinions on both of those players, but you look at the return and you are somewhat underwhelmed. And obviously the Rangers, they were somewhat connected to Peterka. Are they going to go ahead and do an offer sheet? Or are they going to make Buffalo an offer for Peterka? And I don't know if they actually did make them an offer, but regardless, he doesn't go to the Rangers. He goes instead to Utah. So that's obviously disappointing for Ranger fans who were interested in Peterka, myself included. But Peca was asked about Peterka during this interview. He coached him for one season, believe it was just one season, with the Rochester Americans, which is the AHL affiliate of the Buffalo Sabres. And Peterka, again, basically just given away to Utah. And Peca really put him over as a big-time all-around player. Said he was one of his favorite players that he's ever coached, and went on to say that he's going to be a 35, 40-goal scorer in this league. And that just makes me even sadder that the Rangers gave, or rather just were not able to acquire him. It's just one man's opinion, but Peca saw him up close and personal. And when an NHL coach or an assistant coach or whatever it might be has that kind of an opinion about a player, especially one that he's no longer not even coaching, it tends to stand out, and it tends to get my attention for sure. But, some Ranger fans are going after Drury for not, acquiring Peterka when they saw the return for Utah. There's a lot we can go after Drury for. I don't think this is one of them. I get the feeling that Buffalo was not too keen on sending him to the Rangers. The 2 teams just seem to have something of a frosty relationship, and obviously nothing materialized, and he now heads to Utah. But he was also asked about his role with the Rangers and what his new role is going to be with the Chicago Blackhawks. And I found this interesting too. With the Rangers, one of his biggest things was the power play, and then also helping with faceoffs. And obviously the Rangers had an elite power play in year 1, and they had basically a bottom of the barrel power play in year 2. So the tale of 2 different power plays for the New York Rangers. I mean, really, you could point at just about any aspect of the Rangers the past 2 seasons, and they probably were very, very good in that aspect 2 years ago, and very, very bad in it this past season. And I realize that's an oversimplification, but that's also basically how things went with the Rangers, from one year to the next. He also talked about playoff hockey. He played under Peter Laviolette as a player, as a member of the Islanders. And he talked about how loud that building got and how much fun he had during that playoff run with the Islanders. But then he also made sure to mention the Rangers and compare it to Madison Square Garden and his first season there as a coach, coaching in the playoffs in Madison Square Garden. This is what he had to say about it. Having been in MSG 2 years ago in the playoffs, that was equally special. Again, comparing it to the Islanders building. That's the New York fan. That's the New York-based fan. When their teams have a chance, it's loud, it's energetic. And yeah, I do think that, and of course I'm biased here, but when you look at like playoff atmosphere, that energy of the postseason, to me, nothing compares to Madison Square Garden. I mean, they are right up there with the elite playoff atmospheres in this league. But now we get to the big headline, the meat and potatoes, the kind of stuff that got social media really buzzing. Peca's thoughts on coaching the Rangers and what went wrong this past season. And again, this is a great interview. He was talking about being a new assistant coach for the Chicago Blackhawks. And he touched on the fact that there's a high rate of overturn when it comes to coaches in the NHL. I think he mentioned that the Blackhawks are now on their third head coach in the last 4 years. And he mentioned how the Rangers are kind of in a similar situation. We've obviously talked quite a bit about that. The Rangers change their coach more often than some people change their socks. Actually, hopefully not. That would be disgusting. But you get the analogy that I'm trying to make here. The Rangers, obviously, there's a high rate of turnover when it comes to their coaching staff. So he actually mentioned the Rangers very quickly there, unsolicited. And then naturally, the next question did happen to be about the Rangers. Johnny Lazarus asked Peca what his biggest takeaway was with the Rangers from year 1 to year 2, since those were his first 2 seasons behind the bench of an NHL team. And Peca said right away, what you take from it is never take anything for granted. And he talked about how the first year was great with them. It went kind of the same way with the Rangers with Gerard Gallant. They had a great first season there. He talked about in the first season with the Rangers, they set records for wins and longest winning streak and a couple of different things as well. He felt that the Rangers had a lot of things really go their way during year 1 of the Peter Laviolette, Michael Peca era there. And I would agree with that. It is funny how certain seasons, whether it's the Rangers or anybody else, and it doesn't even have to be the NHL, it can be any sport really at just about any level. Certain seasons, you just have everything come together. The pieces just fit, everything clicks. You have guys, maybe, or girls overachieving, whatever it might be, whatever sport it might be. And it all comes together for just an awesome season. And that's what we saw in year 1, where Peca was a member of the New York Ranger coaching staff. But he also mentioned that players and coaches can't just show up the next year and think that it's going to go their way. And that seems to be essentially, I don't think it's as simple as that, but that does seem to be basically what happened with the Rangers. Things were great the season before, and I talked about that because a lot of Ranger fans were really worried about another playoff matchup with the Panthers, and do we have what it takes to compete against that team? And it's a fair question, and it's a valid question. But the thing that I threw out at everybody last offseason is let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here. Both of those teams have to earn their way back to the conference final. If the Rangers and Panthers were to meet each other in the playoffs, it very likely would not have been until the conference final. And hey, the Panthers did their part, but obviously the Rangers didn't do theirs. But that just goes to show, success from one season to the next is never guaranteed, and it's never a sure thing. And it's a lot easier said than done to make it all the way back to the Eastern Conference final and, possibly beyond that point as well. But here's a quote that Peca had as well. There was a lot of stuff outside of the locker room and outside of the coach's room that players and the organization were dealing with that did seep into the locker room. So he's basically admitting there that all that outside noise was a distraction for the Rangers. And I think a lot of us kind of assume that. There have been various reports that all but confirm that. When you watch this Ranger team last season on the ice, the way they went about their business, the way they talked to the media after the game, just kind of the defeatist attitude that certain players on this team seem to exhibit last season. Yeah, I think it pretty much stands to reason that indeed the outside noise got into the locker room and it certainly affected things. And, he talked about how they were trying to clean it up and tell the guys not to worry about the emotional bleep, but it just didn't work. And he did mention that the Rangers had a good start to this past season, and they were 12-4-1 at one point, and then the wheels basically just fell off after that. One more quote here from Peca about everything. Seems like we got a little distracted with having to manage emotions and do all these different things. It's why I've got more gray in my beard. It was emotionally exhausting. So yeah, again, things just, the season just never really got off the ground last year, unless you count the very beginning of the season in October, where, like I said, they did have a good record. But beyond that, there was never that point where it felt like the Rangers were all together and all pulling in the same direction and in any way capable of doing anything special last season. It very much felt that way the season before that, but it never felt that way this past season. And one more quote from Peca that I'll leave you guys with, and then we'll shift our attention to tonight's draft. That's what he had to say. That was the biggest problem in New York. The year before, we went through it a little bit. The year before, we went through a little bit of a lull in January, but we got out of it. Last year, we just couldn't get out of it. We couldn't get things to go our way. No excuses. Our team was good enough to be better, and we did get ourselves there close at the deadline and just couldn't hold on. Yeah, I think that he hit on something interesting there. He said our team was good enough to be better, and I 100% agree with that. Whether or not you think that the Rangers 2 years ago truly were the best team in the NHL, even though they had the best record, that's up for debate. And you look at what happened between the Rangers and the Panthers, and I think the better team did end up winning that series. I think that series was more competitive than certain naysayers would ever admit, but the bottom line, the better team certainly did win that series between the Rangers and the Panthers. But even if you don't think the Rangers were that good enough to have the best record in the NHL, good enough to be even in the Eastern Conference final or whatever the situation might be, there's no way they were as bad as they were this past season. They just never were really able to get themselves together mentally and put their best foot forward. I think the truth lies somewhere between the two extremes that we've seen these past 2 seasons. But we'll see what happens for this upcoming season. Again, I think the Rangers will land somewhere in between those two extremes. But in just a second, want to shift our attention to tonight's draft and what the Rangers should do with their second-round pick now that they no longer have a first-round pick, at least as of right now. You know, there's been no trading back into the first round or anything like that. And I'm actually going to keep my eye on Twitter as I'm recording this episode just to see if anything happens here. And if there's any breaking news of any kind, we might have to pivot on the fly here on Locked On New York Rangers. But we'll do what we got to do. As of right now, the plan is to shift our attention to, like I said, the number 43 overall pick, the Rangers second rounder. We will get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day, and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without all the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it all possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Seat views in the app right before you buy. That is an awesome feature. I absolutely love it. I can't even imagine getting tickets to a baseball game, a hockey game, a concert without using this feature and getting a feel for what I'm actually going to see, what I'm actually going to be looking at, how close am I going to be to the action once I get to the event. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's go and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers as always. In our next episode, going to be breaking down whatever happens in the NHL draft. If there's any big time breaking news, if the Rangers strike a trade, then maybe we'll record another quick episode before the draft concludes. But as the way things stand right now, we'll probably be talking about whichever player the Rangers pick in the second round. Now, of course, it's always possible between now and the time that the draft starts or during the draft itself, the Rangers could trade back into the first round, end up having a first rounder after all. We'll see if they look to go that road, but that is the plan as of right now. But let's also go ahead and keep building on that. And let's take a look at the Rangers options with the number 43 overall pick in the second round of the draft. And of course, the second round won't be until Saturday, but be that as it may, I've got 3 players here that I like quite a bit that I think could realistically be available at number 43. Could go either way. We never know how these drafts are going to shake out, but if these 3 players are there, there are 3 players that I think the Rangers should strongly consider. And we're going to start with my number 1 with this pick. I have not wavered on this at all. We actually did 2 separate Locked On mock drafts here on Locked On New York Rangers. Basically, we just used the draft simulator, collectively wore the hat of the Rangers general manager, and tried to make the picks throughout all 7 rounds of the NHL draft. And the only player that I picked twice, I think it was the only player, was Nathan Behm. Took him in the second round both times because that's how much I like this player. He is a left winger for the Kamloops Blazers of the WHL, 6'2", 185 pounds. In his first 2 seasons combined at Kamloops, 74 games, 12 goals, 20 assists, and was a minus 34. But this past season, he really jumped up quite a bit. 59 games, 31 goals, 35 assists, 66 points. Still a minus 23, but worth pointing out that Kamloops is not a very good team. Got off to a hot start this season. In his first 10 games, had 6 goals and 4 assists. And there's a lot of things. He's just like a really good all-around forward. I really like the idea, first of all, of adding a shoot-first forward, and that's what we'll be getting here in Behm. He fights for pucks in the corner, drives the net, he'll throw the body, he'll mix it up with his opponents, after the whistle or whatever has to happen, has good agility, has a very quick, accurate shot. I feel like these are all things, just about all of them that I mentioned here, maybe not quite all, but most of them, that the Rangers are sorely lacking. They don't really have guys that drive to the net all that strong. I mean, maybe a few, Cooley comes to mind. Fighting for pucks in the corner, didn't see much of that this past season. And being a shoot-first player, they don't really have that guy either. But he'll also, get some dirty goals as well. He can score from some really difficult angles, a lot of different places on the rink, but he can get some dirty goals as well. So that's always nice to see. And very good passer as well. So just a really good all-around player, somebody that I really like. If he's there when the Rangers pick at number 43, I think he's probably my top choice. I mean, I don't know every single player in this draft, but I've done my best here, done as much research as possible. And this is somebody that has been standing out to me for quite some time, ever since the name popped up. And we'll leave you with a scouting report from the Elite Prospects 2025 NHL Draft Guide. With reach, handling skill, and a knack for pulling pucks through traffic, Behm slices through opponents in spectacular fashion. He taps pucks through defenders' triangles, off his backhand, just outside of their reach, and leans into their space to complete the slot cut. From there, Behm subtly changes the angle inside the release or fakes before passing. A strong first touch player, he moves pucks to the middle of the rink instantly. He moves pucks to the middle of the rink instantly and launches one-timers past goalies. So, again, one of my favorites. We'll move on to number 2 on my list here. 2 and 3 is kind of like, it's basically a tie. They're both defensemen, but we're going to start here. I'm going to give a slight edge to Simon Wang. Defenseman, 6'6", 209 pounds. He's going to turn 18 in July. He was with the Oshawa Generals this past season. Of the 3 players that I'm mentioning here, I feel like he's probably the least likely to still be available. There's going to be a team that's intoxicated by that size and physicality at some point in this draft, and it could happen before number 43. But the other interesting thing about Wang is that he seems to be a pretty divisive prospect. A lot of the publications that I've been looking at and all the different opinions that I've been kind of scouring here, they seem pretty torn on him. Nobody seems to really have that firm of a grasp on where he's going to end up going. And my best guess for why that's the case is, like I said, he's a little bit boomer bust, said to be something of a raw prospect, probably has to fine-tune certain aspects of his game. Very much a work in progress type player. But for the 12 publications here, Bob McKenzie has him at number 31. He has him higher than anybody else. He's the only one, I believe, that has him going in the first round. Or, I mean, I guess if you're ranked 31, doesn't necessarily mean you'll go there, but he has him as the number 31 player in the NHL draft. He's also ranked as low as number 82 by Smart Scouting. And again, it's all over the place. 30s, 50s, 70s, like he's all over the place. Nobody can seem to agree. So certainly a polarizing prospect, but size, strength, ability, and there's a good amount of all-around skill there as well. Not going to do a whole lot offensively. In fact, if we combine his regular season games with his playoff games this past season with Oshawa, it would be 53 games, no goals, 5 assists, and he would be +6 in that time. So offensively, not going to wow you, that's for sure, but a very physical player. Obviously, he's got the frame to back it up. Said to have a high hockey IQ and a very, very good skater as well. So that's a lot to like, and we'll leave you with one scouting report here from Elite Prospects, their 2025 NHL Draft Guide. In Wang, you get all the advantages of size without the usual drawbacks that come with it. He can flex his lower body, bring his knees over his toes, and drop his upper body at just the right angle to enable fast and smooth lateral pivots, crossovers, and backward strides. So the proverbial, he's very mobile, very agile for a big man. It sounds like, like I said, I think that first sentence really kind of captures my attention, because in Wang, you get all the advantages of the size without the usual drawbacks that come with it. That sounds pretty good to me. So he's number 2. Number 3, and again, it was pretty close between 2 and 3 for me, but there's another defenseman I'm looking at, Kurban Limatov. Like I said, almost put him over Wang, didn't quite do it, but he is 6'3", 198 pounds. So another guy with size, maybe not quite as big as Wang, but also a defenseman. Played for MHK Dynamo Moskva of the MHL this past season. And again, just a really solid all-around two-way defenseman here. Got a little bit more offense to his game than Wang. Projected to go in the second round, but there were at least two different opinions where, somebody suggested, and I don't have this in front of me right now, but somebody suggested that he's a candidate to be picked a little bit earlier than that. He's somebody that, a certain team, I mean, I don't know if you'd consider a reach, but they might select him a little bit earlier than certain people are projecting him to go. But again, spent last season in the MHL and actually played one game in the KHL as well. But in the MHL, 46 games, 8 goals, 15 assists, 23 points, +7. And then he had 7 playoff games as well, 2 goals and 3 assists, and was also a -3 in that time. So as far as what there is to like, I mean, he's apparently adding more offense to his game. It sounds like his offense picked up as the season progressed. Very, very sound with his defensive positioning. Doesn't get caught out of position too often. Very good at anticipating the play. That goes back to the high hockey IQ, and that's a term that gets thrown around a lot at this time of the year. But for what it's worth, good at anticipating the play, high hockey IQ. Very good athlete as well. And even if he does not produce offensively, it sounds like he's still good enough defensively that you're going to be happy that you drafted him. So said to play a game that is aggressive but not reckless. I like the sound of that as well. And can run point on the power play and also protect the crease during the penalty kill. Always good to have those versatile players that can play on both special teams units. And it sounds like Limatov is one of those guys. Again, Limatov seems a little bit safer than Wang. Maybe has a little bit better all-around game. Wang, though, I mean, the physicality and the size jump off the screen. It's tough. It's kind of 2 and 2A for me at this point as I'm ranking these players, for potentially being picked by the Rangers at number 43 overall. But we'll do one more scouting report here. Again, this comes from the Elite Prospects 2025 NHL Draft Guide. Limatov is a big mobile defenseman that plays aggressively on both sides of the puck to impose himself every game. He's a truly impressive mover, blending jaw-dropping fluidity for a player of his size, while also bringing plenty of explosiveness. He escapes forecheckers on breakouts with ease, then transports the puck across the neutral zone through crossover heavy rushes. It helps that he's also very strong physically, employing a strong base and ideal depth throughout his stride. So there you go. Those are 3 of my favorites at number 43 overall. And I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking. If you've got any second rounders, any late round sleepers, anything you want to throw at me, certainly feel free to leave it in the YouTube comment section. Be interested to see what everybody thinks. But in just a second, we're going to talk about the new collective bargaining agreement that was agreed upon by the NHL and the NHLPA, including one extremely important aspect. I'm going to tell you what that aspect is in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. We've all been there where, the expenses just kind of add up. We go out for dinner with our family. We go to a Ranger game. We go to a baseball game. We go to this activity, that activity. We take a little vacation. The expenses can add up quickly and really kind of make you wonder what's happening. But the bottom line, that's where Monarch Money comes in. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. All right, we're going to go ahead and talk about the collective bargaining agreement. There's one aspect in particular that absolutely had to change, and that is the LTIR loophole getting closed. We've seen multiple teams basically just run wild with this in recent seasons. They put one of their players on LTIR, and then it just so happens that their injury magically heals up just in time, not for the end of the regular season, but just in time for game 1 of the first round of the playoffs. Isn't it so wild how it always works out that way? So that had to change Fortunately, it has changed. Unfortunately, it'll still be in effect for this upcoming year because the new CBA will not go into effect for until the start of next season. So we're going to talk about that in greater detail, as well as other aspects of the new CBA. But if you bear with me for just a second, like I said, just scouring Twitter right now, making sure I'm not missing anything, because if there's any breaking news about the Rangers, we're going to pivot right to that as we speak here. But as I'm going through this, I mean, the Tavares re-signing, he re-signs with Toronto for just north of $4 million per season for four years. But that doesn't really affect the Rangers. I don't think too many of us were clamoring for John Tavares. That never really looked all that realistic anyway. But interesting to know that he will be staying with Toronto. Not really seeing much else, though. Not really seeing much else as far as the Rangers. No breaking news or anything like that. So with all that said, let's go ahead and move forward here and talk about the new CBA. As we mentioned, new CBA was struck earlier today. The NHL had a little press conference. Gary Bettman was there. He talked about it. It's to be a new 4-year collective bargaining agreement struck between the NHL and the NHLPA. And as I mentioned just a second ago, it will begin in September of 2026. They'll be still operating on the current CBA for this upcoming season. Let me just say, first of all, that it's nice to see it actually go smooth. The NHL, they're their own worst enemy at certain times, and it feels like when it comes down to negotiations like this, nothing ever really seems to run smoothly. We've seen multiple seasons, be shortened because, the players and the owners are on the same page. Strike shortened seasons. We didn't have a season in, I believe it was 2004, where there was no NHL season. That was a miserable time to be a hockey fan. And it's just nice to see that everybody was seemingly on the same page. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened behind the scenes there, but there was a report a couple of days ago that a new CBA was being approached, and it's here. It actually happened. There aren't any, at least publicly, contentious negotiations between each side. So that's very nice to see. But with all that said, let's go ahead and get through the most important changes. And, there's other things in addition to what I'm going to talk about here, but we're not going to get into every single nook and cranny of the CBA. We're going to end with the LTIR because that's the biggest one, at least for me. But an interesting change here. I'm not really sure this was necessary, but they did it, whatever. There is now going to be an 84-game NHL regular season beginning not this upcoming season, but the one after that, the 2026-2027 season. And that's interesting because the NHL used to do it this way, but it hasn't been that way in a very long time. It's been 82 games for quite some time, not counting any strike shortened season or any COVID shortened season. We have been at 82 games in the NHL in the regular season since 1995, 1996. The last time we had 84 games was, I believe, 1993, 1994. That was the last time they actually played 84 games. And if I'm not mistaken, something kind of important happened that season. But yeah, we're back to 84 games. The other kind of subplot of that is it sounds like 84 games in the regular season, and there will be just 4 preseason games. I'm fine with it. It's not that big of a deal either way to me. I actually kind of like 6 preseason games. I'm probably in the minority there because I think a lot of fans just want the games to count and let's just get through this and start the season already. But I like giving a lot of different players a chance to, make an impression, try to make the team, try to carve out a big role for themselves. 84 games, 82 games, it's fine, but they're going to go with 84 beginning in 2026, 2027. Another interesting change here. There will be no game day player dress code when players are arriving to or departing from games. You watch them now. I mean, these guys are always dressed to the nines. I don't know if it's like they have to be full-on suit and tie. I haven't really paid attention to the language of the CBA, but it's always very formal. And now I'm wondering if it's going to go in the complete opposite direction. Like, you might see guys showing up in Halloween costumes on Halloween. And you know what? Why not? This is a league that often gets criticized for not doing enough to market itself, not doing enough to make it fun for the casual fan. Look, if players are going to show up with their pajamas or whatever they're going to do, it's fine. It doesn't really affect anything on the ice. Now, there's certain nights where maybe there's like a theme, like, I don't know, like at the Garden, if you have like Garden of Dreams Foundation night or, maybe like Military Appreciation Night, whatever it might be, then I think it makes sense on those nights to have a little bit of a dress code and say, okay, guys, dress up a little bit for this because it's a special night here. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, I don't care how players dress, man. I care how they play on the ice. That's really all that matters for me. Here's another interesting one as well. they are going to lower the maximum contract lengths for both in-house free agents as well as out-of-house free agents. And basically what this means is that if, like, we'll just use the Rangers, for example. If the Rangers want to re-sign their own unrestricted free agent, up until now, the maximum amount of years that were allowed was 8. Starting in 2026-27, it's going to go down to just 7 years. So it goes down by 1 year. And also following suit here, if you want to sign a UFA from around the NHL, right now the maximum length, if you're signing him from another team, is 7 years, and it's going to go down to 6 years. Interesting change. I don't really feel strongly one way or the other. I think I actually kind of like it. You know, the selfish fan part of me likes it because in some cases, whether it's the Rangers or one of these other teams, it sort of like saves them from themselves because we've talked about this. We've seen the Rangers give out, 7-year deals to free agents. And a lot of the reason why they do that sometimes is they are looking to keep the average annual value as low as possible. And if you give more years, it's more overall money. You can bring down the average annual value and it doesn't count quite as much against the cap hit. But the reason I like it for the Rangers is it can save them from themselves because we can't give you a 7-year contract. We're not allowed to. We can only go up to 6 years. And we know when the Rangers or anybody else, when they give out an 8-year deal, a 7-year deal, a 6-year deal, a lot of times you're doing it with the understanding that this deal might not look so good in the final year or two. And you just kind of bite the bullet and do it anyway because you want to get your guy and it's worth it for you, in your own opinion, to bring this guy in, and we'll get, 4 or 5 great seasons out of him, and maybe he tapers off at the end, but it'll be worth it overall. But the bottom line, now teams won't be able to sign out-of-house free agents from other teams for more than 6 years, once again, beginning in 2026, 2027. There will no longer be any deferred salary. That's fine. I don't really feel strongly one way or the other. There will be full-time emergency backup goalies, which it's fine. I get it, but this happens so infrequently anyway. I mean, I don't mind seeing the Zamboni driver hop onto the ice and play a period or two for an NHL team once every 4 or 5 years. I would have preferred that rule, full-time emergency backup goalie, for only the playoffs. Because you don't want to have the Zamboni driver, the 45-year-old Zamboni driver, playing goalie for you in like Game 6 or Game 7. So that I understand. But for the regular season, I mean, it never happens. And whenever it does happen, it's exciting, it's fun, it's unique. So for all those reasons, I wish it was only a rule for the playoffs. But bottom line, that's what they're doing. And the LTIR loophole closing. Thank God. No one is more upset about this than the Vegas Golden Knights and Mark Stone. But we've seen other teams, to be fair, we've seen other teams take advantage of this loophole in recent seasons as well. The bottom line, it had to change. This was, and still is, I guess, because it's going to still be around for this upcoming season, just an egregious and I think borderline embarrassing loophole to just throw one of your top paid players onto LTIR and just leave them there and then activate them for the playoffs. So the way it's going to work now, in a nutshell, teams have to be cap compliant in the regular season. Now they will also need to be cap compliant in the postseason. And we could talk about, like, is it wrong that teams do this? Is it wrong that teams expose this loophole? I don't really have a problem with that because the loophole is there. So take advantage of it. My problem is the loophole being there in the first place. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's very, I guess, short-sighted by the NHL to think that like teams wouldn't do that, to think that teams wouldn't take advantage of such a situation. Because if you have one of the best records in the NHL and you've got the trade deadline rolling around, you're going to be in the playoffs and you can LTIR one or two or three of your players and create all this other cap space. We saw the Panthers take advantage of that this past season as well. We've seen a bunch of teams do it, and it's time for it to stop. And thankfully, we got one season left of it. I mean, we'll see who takes advantage of it for this final season here, but it will be stopping the season after that, which I think is very, very good news. And I would argue that is the most important change that was made in this new CBA. But we'll call it there. Enjoy the draft tonight. Enjoy the draft on Saturday. We'll be back here to break it down on Locked On New York Rangers. But we'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @JChik17. Once again, @JCHIK17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.